people with like 0 SAIs, and Christina knows what I'm talking about. It's like when the financial forms come back and say that you don't make enough money to pay anything because, your income is so low that you're just barely subsistence, and just negative, right? So
you can have a negative 1,500 SAI.
Correct.
Is the floor
right.
now.
And
Yes.
with the new FAFSA, you can go negative now. You can go negative 1,500. So if that's your situation, you're literally leaving all that the full Pell Grant and maybe FSCOG money on the table. So Christina's back to talk more money in college. You ready for another?
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, yeah. Let's bring it.
Let's bring it. So this is a question I get a lot. Christina gets a lot. Anybody who does this work gets a lot. And it's simply this. Do I need to complete the FAFSA? Christina, take it where you want to go.
In short answer, yes. If you want to be considered for any type of financial aid, federal aid particularly, and any merit aid, you would need to fill out the FAFSA. So a lot of times families are like, well, I'm not going to fill it out because I know I'm not going to qualify for anything. Okay. But there's also the assumption that you think you understand how financial aid works, right? So if there is a need, if you need financial aid in any capacity, whether that is merit aid or federal aid, you should be filling this out. There are schools that give merit aid to families with no financial need as they deem financial need, but they won't if you don't fill out the FAFSA. So it's kind of the entry point to receiving any type of financial support from a college. The FAFSA now is out earlier than ever before. I think it's out now for the seniors that are applying this year. And you'll use your prior year taxes to complete it for income. So not last year's taxes, the year before. So it's something to consider in that your financial picture, at least for income, is locked in your student's sophomore year. Okay. They also will look at certain assets as well, but the assets are considered the value of the assets as of the day that you are filing the FAFSA. So not the value 2 years ago, but the value now. And those assets are typically any annuities. They don't take into account the value of your home, retirement contributions, those sorts of things, savings, checkings, anything that's coming from investments, that sort of thing. But they do not take in the value of a home just on the FAFSA. And the 529, yes. Income is assessed at a higher rate than assets, just so you know that. But yes, the FAFSA is very important and should be completed. Now, if you are like, I don't want any financial aid at all, I don't even want to be considered for merit aid, then no, there's no reason to fill it out. And I think this is another question that I get sometimes too of, well, if I'm applying to a school that's need aware and I'm applying for financial aid, does that hurt me? Not necessarily, because with need aware, basically a need aware school is saying, of these students that I've admitted, I want to make sure that I am able to get them here, right? So they are looking at that class based off of what their needs are. If you are someone who has significant resources, a need aware school isn't going to spend a lot of time on you, right? Because you're fine, right? So it doesn't really factor in as much as if you are someone who has a lot of significant need and they have to think about whether or not they can fund you fully, right? So if you're applying to a need-aware school and you're applying for financial aid, but you probably know you're not going to get any need-based aid, it's kind of a non-starter anyway. But if you want to be considered for any of the merit aid, then yes, the FAFSA needs to be filed.
So I answer it differently when I get this question. I do. So FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, right? You need to complete it. Certainly for any federal aid, you're not getting Pell Grant, you're not getting FSCOG, you're not getting federal.
You can't even get PLUS loans. Yeah, you cannot get a Stafford loan.
Yeah, you're not getting any, so you're not getting any of the federal money. So you want the federal money, you need to get it. But then there's some people that say, well, I'm not going to qualify for Pell or FSCOG because your income has to be modest for that. And I don't want to take out those loans. So I get that question a lot. So from my experience, it's a very, very short list of schools that require the FAFSA for merit money. So I tell people to check the schools on your list and see if they require the FAFSA for merit money. And they usually don't. It's a really short list. Like I could count them on two hands, actually. So that's not normally the reason. But the reason that I tell people that they normally want to do it is because it's very common for schools to have a policy that if you don't complete the FAFSA now, then you either can't get it forever when you're in college or 2 years. Like schools usually have a policy of either you got to wait a year. Like, for example, I had a dad who never completed the FAFSA because he made it was about 550, and he knew he wasn't going to qualify. And they didn't link merit money to FAFSA, like most schools don't. But then he decided to leave for a startup that he thought he could make even more, but he was doing startup, so it was going to be really slow for a while. So then he reached out to, I'll even say the school, it was Macalester College. He reached out to Macalester, said, I need to apply for aid now because I don't have the same job I had any before. To which Macalester said, it doesn't work that way because we're need aware. So we might have factored your ability to pay even in your kid getting in. And now, so you kind of can't have it both ways. So Macalester has a 1-year policy. You got to wait a year. Colorado College, they're on co-hosts on our podcast. They have a 2-year policy. Tufts has a 4-year policy. So if you don't apply for it at first, you can't get it for any of your 4 years. So some schools literally are like, okay, in their budget, we've allocated you as a full pay family. And that's how we've pegged you. And we've slotted you in. So to me, that's the biggest reason, because in the minimum, you need to find out what the policy of your schools are on that, because the way, like I've interviewed lots of financial aid people over the years on my podcast, a lot of directors. And a lot of times the way they'll say it is, do you have enough money that if you were to lose your job, you could pay for all 4 years? Most people don't. And because a lot of schools do have that policy of, you can't come in here and present yourself as full pay and then quickly just go to needing all this money the next year. Like, that's not how we do our budget. So that to me is the most important reason. The other thing is increasingly more and more states are requiring people to fill out the FAFSA, even to get their diploma. Like last I checked, there were 7 states, and I checked, that was about 18 months ago. It might be higher now. And that's because so many kids are leaving crazy amounts of money on the table. People with like 0 SAIs, and Christina knows what I'm talking about. It's like when the financial forms come back and say that you don't make enough money to pay anything because, your income is so low that you're just barely subsistence, and just
now it's
barely
negative.
have a roof over your head. Negative, right? So
you can have a negative 1,500 SAI.
Correct.
It's the floor
right.
now.
And with the new FAFSA, you can go negative now. You can go negative 1,500. So if that's your situation, you're literally leaving all that the full Pell Grant and maybe FSCOG money on the table. So you look at a state like Louisiana, they went from having one of the lowest completion rates in the country to at one point they had the highest completion rate because they were, if my memory is correct, the first state to go to the mandatory FAFSA. And it just shot their FAFSA completion rate up because if you can't get your diploma, if you don't do it, and guess what? People are going to do it. And now they're unlocking all of that need-based aid, especially if they're an under-resourced family. So I think it's really important to do it. And especially if your school gives merit money away based on FAFSA, which is not very many schools from my experience, but it's extremely common for schools to have a policy of you can't get it you can't just go from not doing a FAFSA and then turning around the next year and getting money. Because when we do our budgeting, we've kind of budgeted you to not need it, and we got to make our budget work. And so, do you have enough money?
And that's certainly the case when you're an incoming student too. Like if you miss that deadline to apply, and then you get in, and now you're like, oh, I actually think I do need financial aid. Situations change, that sort of thing. No, you were admitted under that financial circumstance. Some will, yes, let you apply next year when it comes around. Sometimes you have to wait, and a lot of times there are schools that even if you choose to defer your enrollment to the next year, you still can't apply for aid because you're holding the acceptance that we gave you under these terms. Yeah. Right. So if you think sometimes it's sometimes just a safety net, it's there if you need it. If you want to take out a PLUS loan, if you want to take out a student loan for any reason, even if you don't qualify for the subsidized staff, or maybe you just qualify for the unsub, you can't get that if you don't file the FAFSA.
Let's explain that.
Now, sometimes
I think some people might not know what you mean. So when you apply for the FAFSA, I'll let you explain it. Go ahead. Go ahead. You can explain it.
So when you apply for the FAFSA, you are essentially applying for any federal financial aid assistance, right? Some schools will use it as a way to allocate their institutional aid. Others will use the CSS profile. We'll get into that later. But for any federal aid, whether that is a Pell Grant, whether it's SEOG, which is very limited now, usually that goes very quickly, or any direct loans. So the Stafford loans or a PLUS loan, you need to have the FAFSA filed. The Stafford loans are for students. They're in the student name. The subsidized Stafford means that the interest is not accruing while the student is enrolled in school. And they are capped for, I think for first year, it's $3,500, second year, $45, and then up to $5,500, $6,500. It increases every year. And then for the unsubsidized amount, this means that the interest is accruing while the student is enrolled. They don't have to start paying it until after they graduate, but the interest is accruing while they're there. And that has a lower amount of usually about $2,000, and then it increases over time. If you, the unsubsidized loan typically are not attached to income. Anyone can qualify for that. The subsidized ones are typically tied to income. So you would need to have the FAFSA filed in order to receive that.
Yes. And basically it's, with it being tied to income, it's not sort of a graduated thing. It's more a matter of when the assessment is done of the income and assets of the family, the student and the parent, and they generate an SAI, student aid index. If that is less than the cost of attendance, then you are deemed to considered to have a need. And if you're considered to have a need, you can be eligible for the subsidized, which basically means the government is carrying your interest, right? So if it was, if it was $3,500, then for the first 4 years, and really it goes to 6 months after graduation. So for 4 years and up to 6 months after graduation, your total interest would be $3,500. It's like taking a 0% loan out for 4.5 years. But if you make $2 million, you still can take out the federal direct student loan. And when Christina says Stafford, federal direct student loan, Stafford, we're using those interchangeably here. We're talking about the federal direct student loan program, right? So, yes.
Correct.
So that there's not a cap on what a family can make to still qualify for that. But if the student aid index is higher than the cost of attendance for the student, then the interest will start right away. You're on the clock for it. But if you look at it, it's really not that much money it's more than it used to be because interest rates are higher. But because that's not that much of a loan, it's still oftentimes worth it to do it depending on the situation. But that's what she means by subsidized and unsubsidized. It has to do with whether or not you're deemed to have a financial need or not have a financial need, comparing your SAI to the cost of attendance at the school. And then depending on if you do or if you don't, then, and if you think about it, like a subsidized loan, like that's a pretty good deal to have 0% for 4.5 years. And then, you can take that money and invest it and grow. And plus the student also builds up credit too. You can be building your credit score, especially if you're making payments, even if you're making small payments along the way, you're starting to establish a credit history. So awesome. Well, I think we tackled this one. Thanks as always, Christina.
Thank you for having me. See you next time.
No, I'll see you next time.